Hello, this is Methods of Analysis of Religious Studies, REL 2011. I'm Professor Joseph Holbrook, and today we're looking at Chapter 8 of Livingston's book, Anatomy of the Sacred. Chapter 8 deals with types of deity. We are going to explore a variety of ways in which deity or the sacred or sacred power have been viewed along a continuum through animism and polytheism, Pantheism, dualism, monism, and finally, monotheism. Until 2000 BCE, before the Common Era, the religious life of most prehistoric and primal societies was animistic. Some more advanced agricultural societies, such as in Mesopotamia or Egypt or in the Indus Valley of India, were polytheistic. Sacred powers were associated with realms and forces of nature, such as the sun, the sky, the earth, the waters, as well as with totem plants and animals, all of which represented sacred power. There normally was a sky god, or sometimes known as a high god. Zeus and Varuna are examples of this, Varuna being in the Vedic religion. Also in the Vedic religion there was Deus, which was the Dios Otiosus, or the hidden god who was the creator but then disappeared. And you can see easily how Deus is related to Dios or Deus or Zeus. In most cases, this was a monarchical polytheism, in which there was a supreme god, but there was a consort, and a number of other gods and goddesses that accompanied him in a divine family. Among the mother goddesses were Ishtar, Isis, and Astarte, and Kali. There was a change in human consciousness from the Paleolithic era through the agricultural revolution into the agricultural era, which ushered in what Mircea Eliade calls the cosmic consciousness or cosmic religion. But then there was another change in human consciousness around 800 BC to 150 to 200, even some scholars say 300 AD, which was a revolution in humanity's religious and philosophical perspectives. Karl Jaspers called this the axial age. Between the Neolithic age and the historical period, there was a move towards greater abstraction in the conception of sacred power. There was also a greater emphasis on the ethical dimension of sacred power. Most of the world religions were born during this time. A few examples: from 750 to 550 BCE, before the Common Era, Hebrew monotheism emerged among the Hebrew prophets, Isaiah and Jeremiah, for example. In Persia, during roughly the same period or a little bit later, a dualistic cosmology and eschatology emerged in Zoroastrianism. Some of these ideas were later appropriated in Judaism and through Judaism into Christianity and Islam. Zoroastrianism had many of the same ideas or concepts as ancient Judaism, such as linear historical time, a divine judgment, a war between good and evil. And in fact, it's possible that Judaism adopted some of these beliefs from Zoroastrianism during the Babylonian captivity. In Greek philosophy, there were similar developments during the axial age. From about 430 BC through 32 BCE, we have Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and then later on the emergence of Greek Stoicism, which began to throw doubt upon the idea of the Greek pantheon of gods under Zeus as the monarch, the divine monarch, and began to focus on the idea of the divine logos, or the ultimate good, to use a term from Plato. Also in northern India, Siddhartha Gautama emerged as the Buddha and began to criticize the caste system and much of the polytheism of the Vedic religion and the Hinduism at that time, and he proposed a much simpler, more ethical approach to escaping the wheel of life and the problem of suffering. Confucianism also emerged during this same time in a parallel fashion in China, and certainly had a strong ethical dimension and as a way of life. The dualism of cosmic struggle. Iranian Zoroastrianism had a high god named Ahura Mazda, but under Ahura Mazda were two divine spirits that were his children, one of which was a good spirit and one of which turned to evil. And these two spirits were co-equal powers, locked in eternal conflict. It's important to understand that the principle of evil was not co-equal to Ahura Mazda, the high god of Zoroastrianism, but the good spirit and the evil spirit were co-equal, also known as the truth and the lie. Another form of dualism was Chinese yin-yang, which is found in the I Ching, or the Book of Changes. You see the symbol at the bottom of our presentation. This was developed during the Qin and the Han periods of China, from about 221 BCE through 9 CE of the Common Era. And this is a different kind of dualism it's not so starkly good and evil, but it's more balancing principles such as masculine and feminine, night and day. In Gnosticism, which one example that we could see would be Philo, who was a Jewish philosopher and a Neoplatonic philosopher. In Gnosticism, God created the world by means of two divine powers. One was the creator of good and the other was the creator of evil. According to the rule of Qumran, from the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Prince of Darkness and the Prince of Light were created by God. Together they rule this world. This reminds us a little bit of Zoroastrianism. Manichaeism was a Christian heresy that spun off from Christianity in the 3rd century of the Common Era, founded by a Mesopotamian teacher named Mani, and it was starkly dualistic of good and evil. Pantheism emerged in the East, as well as monism, and they're very similar. This is not exactly monotheism, but it's a step away from polytheism. The protest against animism and polytheism often took the form of pantheism and even monism. Pantheism comes from the Greek words for all and God, and it is the belief that all existing things, all creation, all cosmos, are in some sense divine, and that God is the creation or the cosmos. Pantheism and monism from the Greek monism comes from the Greek word for single, are often indistinguishable if, for example, it is believed that there's only one divine being or reality and that all finite things are simply modes or appearances of that one. One example would be in Hinduism, with the Atman, the individual soul, being identified as the same as Brahman, or the soul of the cosmos, the divine spirit. The Greek Stoics also attacked popular polytheism and taught that there was only one sacred being, which they called the Logos, or the divine reason. They identified this divine Logos with an element such as ether, or with a basic element such as fire. You see the influence of Greek Stoicism, perhaps, in the Gospel of John chapter 1, when it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." The Greek word there is Logos. In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was God. Hinduism emerged out of the Vedic tradition of the Indo-Europeans, and the Vedic hymns from the Rig Veda, which praised and worshipped the many polytheistic gods of the Indo-Europeans, later was modified by commentaries called the Upanishads that were written in the 8th century before Christ. The Upanishads have a lot in common with Plato and with Greek philosophy, and they identify the one world spirit as Brahman, and that all is part of that one spirit, and there is no such thing as a diverse or plural group of gods and goddesses, but they're all simply manifestations of the one divine spirit. And finally, we come to monotheism, which was a rather late development in the history of religions and is associated with the emerging faith of ancient Israel. However, there were proto-monotheistic tendencies present in a number of movements that sought to reform polytheism, such as Zoroastrianism in ancient Iran. By the way, I just saw a news article that many, apparently it's in the Daily Beast online. I posted the link on the religious studies blog that many Kurdish Iraqis are abandoning Islam and turning to Zoroastrianism, an ancient religion, because they're so distressed by Muslim sectarianism. It's possible Zoroastrianism could experience a modern revival. In Egypt, for a time under Pharaoh Amenhotep IV, around 1400 BC, he identified the sun with the one single monotheistic God. He shared this with his family, but he did not share it with the populace. And so when he died, this monotheistic idea died out with him. Interestingly, the same thing happened among the Incas in 1400 AD, just before the Spaniards arrived, about 130 years later, with the Incan Emperor Pachacuti, who came to worship the sun and identified the sun as the one and only true God, and wrote hymns to the one true God that could almost be used in churches today. The Greeks also arrived at the idea of one single principle of divine reason, or logos, through their own philosophical process. The Jews arrived at the idea of a single God named Yahweh through a different process of historical or divine revelation. Other types of deity include Henotheism, from the Greek word one and God, ascribed to Max Muller, who used it to describe the form of religion in which one God is supreme but others do exist, in contrast to monotheism, in which only one God exists. An example of Henotheism may be the ancient Judaism of the early part of the Old Testament, when there are statements such as Yahweh is God above all other gods, seeming to imply that there are other gods, but Yahweh is supreme above them. Later in Isaiah and Jeremiah, that you see a shift from Yahweh is Lord and God above all other gods to Yahweh is God. Beside him there is no other God. The other gods are only dumb idols of wood and stone. And so there would seem to be within the Old Testament a transition from some form of henotheism to a more strict form of monotheism. Pantheism is a more recent, nuanced view that attempts to combine some elements of pantheism and some elements of monotheism. It's sort of a pantheism plus. Pantheism is the position that God is greater than the universe, but that the universe is contained within God, and that the universe is part of God, and that he permeates every part of nature. He is part of nature. He extends beyond nature, but he's also distinct from it. A number of contemporary theologians of the late 20th and early 21st century have become pantheists. Deism is a concept of deity that existed during the French and Scottish Enlightenment. Thomas Jefferson was a deist. Deism acknowledges the existence of a God, especially a creator God or a first cause, to use Aristotle's phrase, but it believes that this God created the universe like a watchmaker creates a delicate mechanical watch and then winds it up and lets it run according to natural mechanical laws, and the God goes away or withdraws from his creation and no longer intervenes. So a deist believes in God but does not believe in miracles or miraculous intervention. A deist likely would not believe in the literal resurrection of Christ or the divine incarnation of Christ in a virgin. So these are a quick overview of the major types of deity and concepts of deity that we find in Chapter 8 of Livingston's book, The Anatomy of the Sacred. Read the chapter and I'll answer questions this week.